take the survey at the end. It is in the app to rate our session. You are definitely in for a great treat today as we have these gentlemen to talk to you on this panel. So thank you and enjoy.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How you doing? My name is J.R. Green. I am a retired superintendent from South Carolina. With me, I have some of my colleagues, but more importantly, my friends who have all either currently working in the education leadership space or like me have since retired and trying to find out what's next in their professional journey. Today, our session is titled Courageous Leadership in Challenging Times. And I'll tell you that we are in need of some serious leadership in the current climate relative to public education. I tell people that there are forces afoot that aspire to eliminate the institution altogether. And so we must remain vigilant. I'm going to go through and introduce all of the panelists, and then we're going to get right into it. It's going to be a very informal setting. We have some questions that we are going to address. But at any time, if something just moves you think you want us to get into it, raise your hand, and we will deviate from the script. I'll start off, as I said, I'm J.R. Green. I did 12 years as superintendent of schools in Fairfield County, and I always jokingly tell people you made the superintendent years like dog years, and so really 12 years is about 98 years. I am an old man in education because of 12 years in the superintendency. After retiring June 30th, or right before I retired, I wrote a book called Graveyard and Blooming Garden. I have been doing some consulting work, some keynote addresses, but it is a pleasure to be with you here today. Next panelist is Brother Aaron Bishop. I'll let Aaron tell you to introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Two of the most important words ever put together in the English language is thank and you. I want to say thank you. Thank you for choosing this courageous conversation. I am Dr. Aaron Bishop. This is my 14th year as a board member in Richmond County, which is located in Columbia, South Carolina. South Carolina being armpit in the South. And we are considered the capital of city schools in a sense. But I'm also an author of a book called For Such a Time as This. And I would like for you to write that down, because if you don't, I'm going to pull a true heel on you all, and I'm walking out. I'm going to come back in. Y'all better be writing it by then. You can go to Amazon. The book is titled For Such a Time as This, and it's near my name, Aaron Bishop. I am a 3-time chairman of my school district, and again, thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Next up, my good buddy, Baron Davis.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Baron Davis, former superintendent of Richland School District 2. JR said superintendent years are measured in dog years, so I guess I did 56 years. As a school district superintendent, Richland 2 is in Columbia, South Carolina, about 30,000 students. Currently, I serve as senior advisor at Digital Promise, where I work in the Center for Inclusive Innovation, and project currently now developing an inclusive innovation studio for Digital Promise, which is a global nonprofit that's focused on working with historically marginalized student body populations. I also am the CEO and founder of the Noe Genesis Group, which is an education strategy think tank. I provide senior advisement to several organizational leaders around educational matters, including policy, policy development, as well as curriculum and instruction. So it's a pleasure to be here. It's great to see you all.
Thank you, Brother Baron.
Yes, sir.
Next up, Sean.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I don't have a fancy title. I'm still a superintendent. At least I was when I left. Sean Foster. I have the pleasure of serving as a superintendent in Orangeburg County School District. Orangeburg, we have about 31 schools, 10,600 students. I serve the largest minority school district in the state of South Carolina. But also geographically, land-wise, we're about 1,300 square miles. Prior to me coming, we were 3 separate school districts. So I've had the pleasure of serving through a consolidation. So consolidation, poverty, and all those things that come with the social impacts. I haven't been retired yet. I said that intentionally. I have not been retired yet. So hopefully I'll get to retire and not be retired.
Thank you, Sean. And last but not least, my brother Greg McCall.
Good afternoon. Gregory McCord, 30 plus years in education, 25 plus years in educational leadership. I'm not a retired superintendent. I consider myself a got tired superintendent. we were having some discord in my district, and I always felt like, and I told them day one, if it ever gets to a point where the focus is on me, I can help with that. And so I exercised my option to leave out, while I had an opportunity. If not, then I probably would have been a got fired superintendent. One of the things that those of you that know me know, I'm not shy about speaking my opinion, and so there were many times that put me in, actually Barron and I were just talking about this, there were many things that I said that put me at odds with a few board members, but it never stopped me from saying what I thought was in the best interest of kids. And so when we talk about courageous leadership, not just during challenging times, but at all times. All of us have a vehicle and a voice to do what's in the best interest of kids. And know this, when you're doing that, you're going to disrupt the lives of some adults. And so if you're not built for it, then you shouldn't sign up for it. Not that you didn't pray for it, but don't sign up for it, because you're going to be faced with some opportunities where you get a chance to show whether or not this is what you're about versus what you're not about. So now I do a podcast. I'm living my best life with that. I just started. It gives me a chance to talk about some things that are non-traditional with education. So you may hear some cuss words here and there, but I cuss anyway. And then finally, my wife and I, we have 2 cigar lounges. So I'm a real big believer in playing hard. I work hard, so I play hard. So if any of you need some information or advice, we do mail order on cigars. We talk about
That took some courageous leadership right there.
I told you, I'm working, man. I'm working.
No doubt. Well, look here, we're gonna get right into it. And so I talked about some of the challenges that superintendents have in terms of navigating the current and past landscape. And I preceded 12 superintendents in 20 years prior to arriving in Fairfield County. But I want to start off with this first question, and I'm gonna start off with my buddy Greg, since he said he didn't get fired, he retired. What's the word you use?
Got tired.
Yeah, well, I'm about to get fired, but anyway. He's my man. I'm going to start with him. So Greg, I'm gonna put this first question to you. How do you balance, Greg, the courage to do what is best for students with the employment implications of making unpopular decisions?
So just listening to that question, but first let me address, JR and I joke a lot. I did not get fired, but he likes to say that, and I'm fine with that. But how do you balance it? One of the things I did every day, not just during my time as a superintendent, but also as a substitute teacher. I started out Southern, and I wanted to project myself in a way that I could be for students what I wanted in a teacher. Now, mind you, it was no fault of teachers before me that they never had an opportunity to pour or to invest in me. We moved a lot. I come from a single parent home, and so my mother, we moved every 6-7 months, because we were being evicted. So I never had an opportunity to grow roots in a school. And balancing my decisions to do what's in the best interest of kids, it was never a doubt in my mind. I wanted to do something that would help change the trajectory of a young person. Because if we didn't fight the fight for them, who would? And I say that because someone fought the fight for me. I didn't know who it was, but someone did, and I made it. I made it not because of, but sometimes in spite of, And so I think when I hear that question, I always ask myself, if I make this decision, is it going to disrupt adults or is it going to benefit kids? And if the answer was it was going to benefit kids, I knew that more than likely it would disrupt adults. But I did it anyway because it needed to be done.
Okay. Appreciate that, Greg. Barry, I'm gonna let you follow up with that. That's any question.
You know, we had a mentor, the four of us up here, because you were out with Q's.
You see, it takes 4 Q's and they went out.
We had a mentor, a great man in the city of Columbia in the state of South Carolina by the name of Vince Ford, who used to come here quite regularly. And was a board member in Richland 1 for many, many years. And Vince used to say, do right, sleep tight. By kids, right? And then we have another mentor who I recently heard say something that I think we've all lived our life trying to live our lives this way as courageous leaders. Is that it's okay to be afraid. It's just not okay to be cowardly, right? And so when you're making these decisions, you're making these decisions with what's the best interest of children. And now we all know we had a dime for every time somebody said, I want to do what's best for kids, we all be millionaires. And most folk really don't really believe that because they won't sacrifice to do what's best for kids. And a lot of leaders are serving in a self-protective mode. They see wrong and they turn a blind eye to it. I tell you, one of the things that I'm struggling with now as a leader is to all the stuff we said about what we wasn't going to go back to after COVID. We went right back to that shit. I'm part of my pastor. But we went right back to all of that stuff that we said we weren't going to go back to. And now that the ESSA cliff is here, the funding is now is going, and we're losing the funding now. Now we got to decide how we're going to now fund our schools and our school systems appropriately. And so it's going to be interesting to see how many courageous leaders we have who's going to be willing to stand in the trenches for those students who need them the most. It's going to be simple. It's going to be simple to see if you, when we're talking about the teacher shortage, I can tell you there's some schools and some classes that don't have teacher shortages. AP classes, ain't no teacher shortages in AP classes. Grade level algebra 1, shortage. Right? Physics, there's no shortages. But physical science, shortages. So it's going to be interesting to see how many kids, I'm watching right now, one of the things that's killing me is to watch schools have substitutes, rather have a sub or a no teacher than just put a person in the room to hopefully build a relationship with a kid. Until we can get a teacher in the classroom. But I know I walk into some classes, and some of those classes, some kids have gone all their entire careers and never had a long-term sub. So it's going to take, how do you balance that? You do what's right for the kids and you mean it, you stand on it. Is it something that's in your heart? It's got to be, and you got to be willing to take the fall, the stabs, the daggers, and the things that come along with it. And if you do that, if you do what's right, you'll sleep tight at night. So that's what it's going to take.
Me and Greg joke about, him getting fired. But the reality is, in this role, you expect that you probably don't get fired.
Don't run from it.
So I retired after 12 years. I retired before I got fired. Because if you stay long enough, there's a strong likelihood that you go upset the apple cart somewhere. So if you're really doing what's right in terms of leadership, getting fired really ain't that big of a deal. That's why we joke about it, because we know that it just comes with the territory. That means you want to do a good job. Now, Aaron is the only one on the panel who fired the superintendent. He's a school board chair, all right? So he's one of the people who fired us, but he's still our boss. Probably because we don't work in his district, you know what I mean? So he can't fire. But Aaron, I'm gonna go to you, Aaron, with this next question.
Hold on, Jared, if I can. Let me say this, because the room isn't full of superintendents. I say that because the same measure applies for those that are working in roles as principals. If you're working in the role of a principal, he's talking to you, we're talking to you as well. If you're working in the role of an assistant principal, He's talking to you, we're talking to you as well. If you're working in a role as a teacher, he's talking to you, we're talking to you as well. So don't think that it applies only to superintendents, because it does not. It transcends all. If it's about the business of kids, you're going to be touched in some way or the other. I just want to
Thank you for that clarification, brother. Yeah. But Aaron, tell us how you deal with the invisible tax on black youth.
Let's chew on that for a moment. But let me just tell you all that I am Tito Jackson. We are the Jackson 5. Michael, good question. I think with the invisible tax, the first thing is you have to recognize that it's there. And for those who may not know what the invisible tax is, it's the unseen, unaware pressures of your responsibility. Whether you're a board member, whether you are a teacher, a principal. Because I look like you and you look like me, you're getting the tax on you. You're always asked to do 10 times better. You can't be imperfect. You gotta always get it right. You gotta try harder than anyone else. And that's tax. And that pressure makes you almost feel like you're Atlas and you're holding up the world. All because you wanted to save the world one kid at a time. How you deal with it, I'll tell you this, and then I'm sure everybody else on this panel can share. For the truth of the matter, when you are doing your responsibility, you're answering a question. And the question is, according to our mentor, how are the children? And your response is, all the children are well. So let's start again. How are the children? Your response is?
All the children are well.
That all word really brings the tax on your life, because you can't do all. You may try, but that pressure is going to sit on you, and you're going to get burnt out, because you're going to try over and over again. I was looking at this video today, a young lady who failed at winning her state pageant over 6 or 7 times. And about the 8th time she tried again, and she finally won, and that woman became Miss America. I'm telling you not to give up, but I'm also telling you to give in to your community. It is a community help that you need. You're not in this thing by yourself. When you are dealing with the taxation that is invisible on your life, let someone know that you recognize that this is getting a little much. And remember to protect your mental health. Remember to talk to somebody and have that circle like my friends here with. The radio, the news, the media, the comments on Facebook is overwhelming me. I call on them. They allow the pressure to come out of that pressurized situation. So when you're dealing with the invisible tax, find your community help. You are not in this battle by yourself, because the truth is, when you hear the question, how are the children? And all the children are well, if you don't use the word all, it sounds a community alarm. Because it says something is wrong in our community. Because if the child is not okay, then we should not be okay. And so that's that invisible tax. How many of y'all probably cried? Well, no, some of y'all didn't. But how many of y'all cried on the last day of school when that bus rolled off? Because you didn't know where that kid was going for something. Invisible tax. How many times when you see a kid going home for the weekend and that child doesn't have food in their home? Invisible tax. That child comes in smelling like marijuana. Invisible tax. So I'll be quiet, because
Yeah, you took more of your time, man.
yeah, you don't need to have a moment.
Yeah. You took some of Sean's time right there. You know, and I want to say this before I put this question to Sean. Very often, as black leaders, we taxed on both sides. And so others hold us to a different standard, but guess who holds us even to a higher standard? We do. I mean, who gives you a harder time than anybody? Are people who in your same church, people who you eat in the soul food restaurant with, And so I want us to really think about whether we fairly hold our black leaders to unrealistic standards in many instances. But Sean, I want you to speak a little bit to the invisible tax and how you are able to navigate it.
So if you notice, I'm still the only one that's the superintendent sitting up here. So, and I say that because the way that I move just in the exchange here now is the answer to that question. So I have a mentor, retired Supreme Court Justice John Baylor, who taught me something early on, and he said, you have to understand how to be submersive, not submissive. And what he explained to me was there's a point where you have to know what the tax is, but also where the tax is. Because sometimes, as JR just mentioned, sometimes the tax comes from people that may share a different political belief. But sometimes the tax comes from people that may be sitting right beside you, or that you interact with each and every day. So understanding what it is, and that what changes given the scenario in which you're dealing with in your current role, and that where changes as well. So I'm blessed because I'm in a district where everything black in South Carolina comes through on. So I can say some things that a Baron couldn't say in his district because of his board makeup.
But I said it.
You said it.
That's why I'm superintendent.
But also, the intent of being submersive is that we have to learn to move until we get to the position where in which the ultimate decision is yours, irregardless. But in doing that and being submersive, it's important that we bring someone along that is going to be an heir apparent, irregardless of what you do. So oftentimes, Darrell Johnson in here? Darrell Johnson? Darrell Johnson's back there, so he was the interim before I became the superintendent. And so he set the stage and did some things and cleared some things out, not all of them. He should have did more. But I'm happy for what he did. But the fact that he knew there was potential that I was coming through, he cleared some of those things out of the way. We don't sometimes do that. When it's time for us to go, we pack up our bags and go. I still have 2 letters in my desk, Darrell Johnson, that I have not had to open up one. And when I got in my office, he said, when it gets tough, open up this letter. And he said, on the second, he says, if the first letter didn't work, open up this letter. I don't know what's in them. I've not yet had to open them, but there are some things that he moved out of the way. So that mentorship and standing in the gap and the notion of, and I say this all the time, you can't work so hard to keep a job that you fail to do. So some folks that have the leeway to do the work, sometimes don't do it. And it adds that individual tax on those ends. So we have to clean those out and understand where and what that tax looks like.
You know, before we move on to the next question, I want to give my buddy Sean a props. Sean closed, how many schools, Sean?
9 schools.
Sean closed 9 schools, and what?
In my first year superintendent.
First year superintendent. I told him he was gonna get 5. Right?
He did. He told me.
Yeah.
And I said,
And he did it successfully, and it's still there 6, 7 years later. That took some guts, number one, and some political astuteness to be able to pull that off. Yeah. But those of us who worked in district leadership know the most difficult thing you can do is close schools. Because people are emotionally invested in those schools. Close that many schools is a tremendous feat, so we get our buddies props on that. I'm moving on to the next question. I'm going to start with Baron. Baron, how do we prepare the next generation of black leaders?
Well, great question. I really wanted to answer the black tax question.
Well, wait, you got tax and then
Let me answer that question because I was unsuccessful at the black tax before, and I want to speak from the perspective of not being aware of the black tax. Because I sat in a board meeting. I contracted COVID early in COVID before the vaccine. And I was so afraid of missing a board meeting that we were doing doing our board meetings online. I got a heater under the table, a blanket, I got my tea, I'm doing the mist, all the stuff I can do in between the meetings just so I don't miss a board meeting. I had a 100+ temperature for 14 days, but I was afraid to miss that board meeting because I knew it was going to be held against me because nobody had sympathy for me as a leader, as a superintendent, as a black man, telling me to take care of myself. So I was afraid to miss that board meeting. That was a tax, a physical tax, an emotional tax, the mental tax, even a spiritual tax on you when you do things like that. So now I'm sitting in and we're going through COVID and we're all catching fire and catching hell from everybody, right? And I'm waking up one morning, I don't care what decision I make, it seems like somebody is upset about the decision. You're being called things online, people saying you're trying to kill their kids, you gotta make a decision about who gets to go back to work first, you gotta make a decision about when the kids come back to school, when the pressure was on, and every time we make and you're just waiting to see what the next decision will be. We just had a teacher not too long before that who passed away from COVID. So now I got an actual real issue in the school district that we are living with. How do I manage to navigate this pressure doing that? And I'm struggling. I have nobody to talk to. I'm afraid to be vulnerable, to tell people I'm struggling with this decision. I do some meditation and I come across in the book of Numbers, and Aaron will know this, and Moses was leading the children out of Israel, and I felt like that's what we were doing as superintendent, leading children out of the wilderness, leading people out of the wilderness, and they complained the whole time. They were in bondage, but he got them out of bondage, and they complained the whole time. It's like we would rather be in Egypt when we had something to eat, but they eating figs and whatever it was they were eating. I don't want to quote the Bible wrong. But Moses asked God, why you burden me with these people? And as superintendent, I was feeling like, why you burden me with this responsibility? And I believe God told Moses that you need to go get 70 people and bring them to this tabernacle. Let me put some anointment on these folks to help you lead. And that's when I realized I wasn't distributing leadership. How do you handle the task? You need to distribute the leadership to people who can help you do the work. Stop holding on to all of this work. Stop holding on to all this work and find you good people in your village, in your community that you can distribute this leadership to. Let's give these folks some agency and some ownership in this work so they can have the urgency they need to do to have to fix it. That's how you handle that black.
Good people. Now, he said good people, because you get the bad ones, you're going to be working double time.
But you know, and before I go to Greg, because Greg wants to speak to the black tax as well, you know, I think, and I spoke to this last week when I spoke to a group of young men, unfortunately, culturally, we have been taught down as black men, particularly men, that you don't complain. Right? You don't be vulnerable. You don't cry. You don't be soft. You got to suck it up. You got to work through it. And in many instances, it has negatively impacted our health. Okay? Because we feel as if we cannot be vulnerable. But Greg, you want to speak to the invisible tax?
I just want to talk a little bit about something Darren said with the black tax. So as we rise in leadership position, we have a responsibility to do just what he said, and that's distribute. And you do that by bringing others up. We have a tax on us that we can't bring anyone up behind us unless they are better than us, right? When fact is, other groups are bringing people up that do 10 times worse than anybody that we might consider bringing up. I remember a time when I was the only black face in a room where we would constantly talk about who to bring up. So if you're a black face in a room and you have the opportunity, speak up. Don't be silent. That's a tax in itself, being silent. That silence keeps others from coming up. So I constantly brought up as many as I could because I felt like that was my charge. That's the least of the duties that I could do to help others get along. And so don't be afraid for others to battle you when you know you're doing the right thing and bringing others up, because is not our work to do alone. And it's not our work to, let me say it this way, you're going to be marginalized anyway from day one. And you don't have to speak to this. How many times do brothers, and I'm going to talk about brothers, not sisters, because I love you all. I love brothers too, but how many times do brothers get jobs and the first thing we say is they got that job because of, and it never has anything to do with their academic ability to lead the institution. He got a bald head. He wears a bow tie. He big. He don't take no jump. He speaks his mind. He dressed nice. We need to be viewing each other as being academians first, not as anything other. Because when I walk in, the first thing they say is, "Bean pie, my brother." When my friend back here walks in with a bow tie on, they call him professor. People don't even call me Dr. McCord because they say, "You're not a real doctor." I'm like, what does that mean? Ladies get it, men don't get it. That's a tax that we fight within ourselves as to whether or not we amount to, or we're equal to, or we're better than. So again, bringing others up is the least of what you can do so that you can help spread that tax that Barron is talking about. So do that if you have the opportunity to do so.
So got one statement. I don't want to overlook this. We talked about the inability for black males to be vulnerable, but I don't want to misconstrue that, because I'll tell you this: sometimes in many ways it's more difficult for a black woman to do the same. So I don't want to make that as being overtaken. Sometimes we get some of the benefit of the not being taxed, because I can tell you this, in education, as a black male, I can walk into some rooms and I can do some things and I can say something, and they'll say, "Well, he's a strong man. He don't take no mess." I let you walk in and say the same thing I said. You gonna be a bitch. So I don't want to overlook the fact that, again, that tax, you gotta know what it is and where it is. Because the vulnerability piece, and let you be vulnerable in a leadership role as a black female, you're either gonna be a bitch and not be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable and not be well equipped to do the job. So I don't know where you stand, but y'all gotta figure it out. But so I didn't want to let it be an oversight. And I didn't call you a bitch like that. I was she said she can call you a bitch, not me. That's what she said. But that's what I mean. That's what they're taking in their mind.
I agree with what you said relative to the challenges, particularly on black women. But I stand by my statement relative to black men always feeling the need to project this strength and never be vulnerable. I told a story, and my wife will laugh about this, my wife will hear. I was very close to my grandmother. And when my grandmother passed, I went in the bathroom and I was sitting on the toilet and they crying. And my wife was knocking on the door saying, "What you doing in the bathroom?" I said, I'll be out in a minute. And as I reflect back on that time, here it was, I was married to this woman, and I was fearful of having her see me crying. And I said, I had been taught that you don't cry in front of women. Really, I had never seen my daddy cry in his life, even at his brother's funeral. And so I had been raised that way. And I think a lot of us have been instilled with this kind of false sense of what manhood is. And we take that not only in our lives and our marriages, but into our profession. So when I talk to you, so that's what I was speaking. I'm trying to dispute what I'm saying.
Next question.
I'm going to take this here to the Baron. I said I'm going to Baron. How do we prepare Baron the next generation of black leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question, JR. I would hope that, what we need to do as current black leaders is, I think we need to have an agenda that we share with young black leaders, right? When I became a superintendent, I was hearing from a lot of black leaders in the city who were leaders in other areas, because you have in other areas and professions, and they were all talking the same thing. And I asked one, I said, so what's the agenda? What are the 3-4 things we want to accomplish? And how are we going to accomplish that? I think that's important. And sometimes we've been made feel like having an agenda is a bad thing. Like, what is the direction we want to go? How do we want to develop black leaders? What is the purpose for doing that? I think it's up to people who have had the mantle to reach out to young leaders. I think sometimes we wait on the young people just to come to us and say, can you be my mentor? If you see a talented young person or a person who needs some direction but has the will, and not necessarily skill, but they got the will and the desire to do the work, then we should be reaching down and finding those individuals and giving them the instruction and the guidance that they need, and always be willing to extend a hand to help them up. Not just be critical of the things that young leaders are doing, but also sharing with them how you would have done things differently, how you may have do things better. I think for us as well, we kind of be open to the idea of being coached and mentored ourselves. So we say young leaders, just leaders next generation, even the current generation leaders. There are some, I was telling Greg today, I got a wealth of knowledge of what not to do. Of what not to do. But people always ask you, what should you do? I can tell you what you shouldn't do. And by avoiding these pitfalls and traps, how this could help your leadership and advance your cause a lot further. You know, everybody can't go into the room. JR and I like to kind of coin ourselves as Malcolm and Martin. Everybody can't be Malcolm, and everybody can't be Martin. You got to decide who you're going to be, and how do we cultivate and nurture that? How do we bring these people together? I would love to see us do a better job of bringing young leaders together and having conversations like this with them around leadership, around making good decisions, giving them a network of other young leaders to connect with, as well as a network of older leaders who have walked the path before them. And I'm hoping that individuals will be open, both young and current leaders and past leaders will be open to that. I've learned so much from leaders who come before us, before me, and sitting in their presence and just listening, like we used to do, like old folk used to just sit around, just listen, and hear them talk about some of the challenges and the struggles that they went through, some of the decisions that they made, how they process information. Understand that you don't have to rush to make a decision so quickly. If time's on your side, take advantage of those things. And the last thing I would say is that it doesn't have to be in education. Some of the best mentor, we don't need just educators to mentor other educators. We just need good leaders and good people to mentor other young good leaders and good people, whether they're in the field of education or whether they are policemen or whether they are physicians. It doesn't matter. We just need people who have the will to do that and share that knowledge.
You know, man, as I think about my professional career, Steve Wilson, who's a Q, by the way, was very instrumental in where I am today. And when I think back on Steve's view of me, Steve was truly invested in my success. He didn't simply measure his success by what he accomplished. He measured his success by what I was able to accomplish. And I want us to really think about whether we really view it through that lens as leaders. Do we view it through the lens of, man, I want this guy to be the best that he can be. I want him to eventually replace me. Or do you say, man, I don't want this guy to eventually replace me? I mean, Greg always had a conversation about this whole competitiveness that we have amongst each other. And I think competitiveness can be good, but sometimes competitiveness can be negative as well. And you know, we can talk about that a little bit. But Aaron, I want you to
Say something on that.
I want to speak to it as well.
Okay.
You want to go first because I've been silent for 20 minutes.
Y'all know you do some extra time.
Go ahead, Greg.
Just by a show of hands, how many Barry spoke to something that's very very concerning. How many of you, maybe you don't show your hands, how many of you have someone that you consider to be a mentor, a professional mentor for you and your role as a leader? And I say that because, and you didn't have to raise your hand because, thank you for you. Those of you that didn't, we offer consulting services. But anyways, we've been coming to Skasson for over 12 years. Now, check this out. We have benefited from the same circle of friends as mentors. When we would come to Skasson, we never attended a session. NABSE. I'm thinking about Skasson. I'm sorry. In South Carolina. NABSE. Yeah, NABSE.
After the second one, I could let you do a third.
Yeah, you should have stopped that first. That's a good friend. NABSE. We never attended sessions. We always, some of you may remember, we always posted up in the front. It'd be about 12 or 15 of us. Dr. Epps, Vince
I would have
Ford.
bought it at 15.
We bring you along. Cato was there, Darryl Johnson was there, but we learned more in those 4 days, all-day session with the former superintendents, former leaders, former administrators from back in the day. And that led us to where we are today. So again, if you don't have a professional mentor, definitely consider that, because no one can help you better than the person that can tell you what not to do. As parents said, I can definitely tell you what not to do, but I can also share with you on what to do. And you can get my information out there.
Yeah, you can hold it back.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Who's a preacher, man? You talk something.
Well, I would say my advice to you is not to take the baton to the graveyard. A lot of times our leaders don't pass the baton in the level of mentorship, leadership, because maybe they're intimidated. Maybe they just, don't want to hand over the baton because, unlike JR has said, they don't want to see the next generation as successful as they are. So, but the truth is that I think we have an us problem. We have an us problem where we have to literally go to the graveyard, dig the body up, open the coffin, and pry the baton out the hand of the corpse. Let's cancel that. Let's continue that now. And the way you do it is you get over yourself. I'm saying that out of love. It's your turn when it's your turn. But here's what I would tell you to take with you about your turn. Do not operate in the spirit of fear and failure. A lot of people have a fear of failure, where they don't want people to see them fail. But what great mentors do, they let their mentees see them fail. Because as a poem I always quote, it says, your advice may be misleading, but your example is always clear. My mother, who I love and miss every day, taught me one of her favorite scriptures. She says, you have this faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains, right? She said, but baby, I don't want you to see my faith. I want to see you. I want you to see me move this mountain. So a lot of times you see their faith because they make the impossible possible. But when they literally see the mountains move, and your mentor is moving mountains, and they may fail, but they keep on fighting, they keep on doing it, that's when you grow the resilience of your own leadership. Because you saw that person who's such a great example of leadership, and guess what? They're not perfect. They had their own kryptonite, they had their own challenges, but they overcame it. And so that's one of the things I would like to share with you all, that as leaders, we have to get over that. And then I know this has been rehearsed a lot of times, the imposter syndrome. I won't go deep into that, but look it up and study it, because maybe some of us as leaders, we're dealing with that. And so you don't have anything to pass on, because you're challenged with believing in yourself. But today I want you to know that you can believe in yourself, because I believe in you. I don't hardly know all of you all, I know some of you all, but guess what? You are a leader, because you're leading somebody. I'll be quiet, baby.
Pass the plate, pass the plate.
You know, man, I want you to add something.
I want to ask something.
Okay.
I'm gonna look at it from a different approach, guys. Everybody in here has a mentor, mentee. I believe it's also important that as we develop the next set of leaders that we are intentional in our selection process. Because everybody ain't built to lead. I may like you, but that don't mean you are built to do this type of work. So we talk about courageous conversations. When that individual comes up to you and says, you know, I want to be a principal, I want to be a superintendent, when you mentor me, at some point you have to turn and say, I don't think you're ready. Because that black tax, that invisible tax that we talk about, it's going to be on them too. So we have to be honest about who we're choosing to be the heir apparents in this leadership arena. Sometimes we just say, well, we like him, we don't have the courage to have that honest conversation. And we wonder why situations get even more difficult for blacks in leadership roles. Because we've selected people who don't have the skills or the courage to be successful in leadership.
Hopefully we not being elitist though in that perspective, right? Hopefully as we're looking at future leaders, the young people, we're not looking down upon them and with this air of elitistness from our years of experience and discerning that they aren't ready or they're the wrong person. Because they are gonna get that from other folk. So we gotta be more accommodating, dig a little bit deeper, see past the dirt and the mud, and help try to pull some of those young leaders, those young folk out. Maybe it's some corrective measures early in their leadership to be able to do that, so that we're not turning away potentially great leaders who just struggle because they have other issues, because they're gonna get that from other folk. And so I don't disagree with that, but I think we just have to be careful that we're not saying that a person's not ready because we're viewing it through our own biased lenses and opinions on what a leader should be. They may be leading in a different way or a way that's different than our way, but it doesn't mean they don't have the desire. Because I'd rather take that bull in a china shop that's courageous and want to do it than that timid person who can say the right things to the right people, who are always shucking and jiving and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing to try to get the roles, and then when they get the role, they don't do the stuff that they told me they were going to do when they were supposed to do it. I want to see the courage and guide that courage and that person that's shucking and jiving.
You know, man,
I don't necessarily agree, partially. Because you can have people that are willing and unable. So, you know, irregardless of that, it's the intentionality of the individual that is choosing to mentor that person. Because there's a level of damage that we can also do when that person's in the mud that they can't recover from. So again, we don't always agree on everything, but I believe it has to be. I've seen a lot of people who are willing, but quite frankly, they're unable, and we gotta say what it is sometimes, because now may not be their time. And we have to say that to them, and when the right time comes, then we can get them. So it's not an elitist approach. I believe it's an intentional approach, and it protects not only the state of black leadership, but also that individual as well. So we can look at that from both perspectives.
man, I want you to speak this up. I got you. Okay, yeah.
Kick us out.
So man, I want you to speak to this. I mean, we've talked about mentoring young leaders, but the reality is there are experienced leaders that need mentoring as well.
Yeah.
And Barry does executive coach, and I do executive coach, and I've had success, and Greg, and me and Barry have talked about this before. Why is it that experienced leaders are resistant to try to seek mentorship and guidance and coaching to help them move to the next level or become even more effective leaders?
I don't know why it is, you know, other than I think it's almost like an admission that you may be more insightful or better at something than I am, and I don't want to admit that my colleague or my peer or someone that looks like me is better than me at something. I was talking to Greg about this earlier, and I said, you know, Tiger Woods had a swing coach. Don't mean his coach was a better golfer than him. He just knew how to coach him through his swing. Tom Brady has a quarterback coach. Doesn't mean that the person that's coaching Tom Brady is a better quarterback than Tom Brady. He just knows how to coach him through the mechanics. Sometimes a person who's been through it, who may not be as successful as you are, they see things from a different perspective as you do. And they can give you insight on things that you may be blind to, because none of us can see 360 degrees at all times. And we oftentimes ignore the things we're the weakest at and always focus on the things that we're the strongest at. And if you ignore your weak points long enough, they will catch you. Right? They will catch you. I used to talk about the fact that when I was a principal, I wasn't really big on all the fluff and the things that come with the work, like, oh, great job. You know what? That came calling. It came calling one day because I should have done a better job of bringing my board members along with me as I was climbing, we was moving, I wasn't doing that. I should have been checking on them, making sure they're okay. I didn't do that, and eventually, that caught up with me. So you need people who could have seen that and say, hey, Baron, remember the first rule of the 48 rules of power? Never outshine the master. I forgot that rule. And as I started to ascend and started to get a national profile, I forgot about some of my board members. And I can admit that now, that I would do that differently. But if I had a coach or someone was willing to tell me, hey, it looks like you're forgetting about them, you might want to make sure you're bringing them along with you. The next time you go speak, take that person with you. The next time you go to this conference, take that person with you. Remember to make sure that the people know, that they know they got a role in the success as well. And it's not just about you. It's not just about the kids. You also got to tend to that too. So a coach will help you see through those blind spots that you have, regardless of how successful you are. The most successful people in the world have a coach.
So man, before I go to Greg, would you have been receptive to a coach early in your superintendent career? Did you say now, you said, had I had a coach, I think I would have done it differently. Would you have been receptive?
I would have, because in the midst of my superintendent, I turned to my mentors to coach me. So I went to them and said, hey, I got a problem, I got a dilemma. But if I was starting over as I would make sure this in my contract. That an executive coach is in the contract, because you are a CEO of a multi-million-dollar, sometimes billion-dollar entity. And you should have an executive coach in your contract, because you don't know everything about financing. You don't know, you might know a lot about instructional leadership, but do you know when to refinance your bonds when the market turns? Are you prepared to do those things, to restructure your bond debts so that you can lower taxes in your community? Somebody needs to be able to tell you that. That saves taxpayers millions of dollars. So you having those types of people around you, surround yourself with as many wise people as you say. That's how you get to how wise a person is, with the number of wise people he surrounds himself.
Thank you, man. Appreciate that. All right, Greg, I'm going to go to the next question there. I want to make sure we stay on time. In situations where you may be one of the few voices for shared humanity, how do you share humanity? How do you identify and build alliances with those who support these goals, especially in potentially unsupportive environments? We are at a point right now where we're going to have to build alliances. That's the reality. I mean, as much as we can do it all ourselves, that's not the reality, folks. We're going to have to build alliances. How do we build alliances with people across a broad spectrum, people politically, racially, religious, whatever? How do we build those alliances around shared humanity?
I think, just very quickly, in respect of time, we have to understand in our role as leaders, every fight is not ours to fight. We come in automatically geared that it's time to buck, it's us. That's not true. In building alliances, we have to understand also that we have a platform. Every opportunity we get to go out and speak and bring others in, we have to do that. So it's important that you're a part of your Rotary. It's important you're part of your, what's some of the other ones? your Chamber of Commerce. It's important that you do like JR, visit every church in your community. Because you need others that can step up and fill in the gaps. Because if you're always the one out fighting, guess what happens? You're in direct fight every day. Somebody's going to be successful. And when that leader goes down, I think, Corey, you're a military man. What did they say about the colonel? Yours is not to shine the cannonball. Yours is to what? Give the direction?
I've never heard that in my life.
And that's why we only have 1 hour. That's why. Oh, Darryl. Okay, go ahead, Darryl. What is that?
The statement was, the superintendent, your job is not to shine a cannonball. Your job is to say fire. Trusting other people, supporting them, working with them. That's the phrase.
Y'all ain't never been in the military. I mean, I ain't seen that. I ain't been in the military.
I don't know for Alpha. It had to be him. But again, just very quickly, just understanding that every fight is not yours to fight. Go out, recruit, bring along others so that they can go out and take some of that friendly fire so that you can live on to fight the next fight.
All right, gentlemen, it's 3:41. So that means we got about 45 seconds to wrap up. 3:45 is our time. I'm gonna give each of y'all 45 seconds for your closing comments. Start with you, Bishop.
I'm gonna respond to your question and give my closing comment. Don't shrink. If you're one of the 3 voices in the room, do not shrink. There's a story in my book called "For Such a Time as This" by Aaron Bishop on And the Congressman Jim Clyburn gave me 4 words, and he is a fan of tortoise. And he talks about the race between the tortoise and the hare. And many of us know that the rabbit fell asleep, but you examine how the turtle won the race. And in his writing, he says the way the turtle won the race is that it stuck his neck out. If you sleep and you don't stick your neck out, you won't win this race. And guess what? The race is not won by the swift or the strong, but it's going to be won by the ones that endure. We are in some challenging times. And I promise you, with McMahon being our Department of Education leader, and she coming from the WWE, we won't be dealing with education. We're going to be dealing with edutainment. And so stick your neck out and make sure the main thing stays the main thing. You are an educator. You are a leader. And we need you for these challenging times to be courageous.
That's a long 45 seconds.
Hey, the world stage is filled with actors. What we need is people who are about action. Right? That's what being a leader is about. Action, and to act, for action you have to act. A is authenticity. Be authentically yourself as a leader. Don't try to mimic my leadership style or the person's leadership style next to you. Read all the books you want, but you need to know who you are as an authentic person. And if you don't know, it's the perceived self and the actual self. The closer aligned those 2 versions of you are, the more authentic you are. Who you perceive yourself to be and who you actually are. Let's align them up. The C is for courage. Be courageous. You're gonna be afraid, and being afraid is okay, but you cannot be a coward. So be courageous and take courageous actions. And the T is for truth. Stand on the truth. Do the right thing. Be truthful. If you put those things together, then you will be the type of leader that we need and our children deserve.
Thank you, man. Sean.
Real quick, 2018, I had stage 4 cancer. So the advice I'm gonna give you is the advice that I live with every single day. I walked into an ENT's office, not even sick. And he did a biopsy and said, listen, you have cancer. I said, well, the doctor doesn't work like that. He said, I'm gonna send you to do a CT scan, come back in 3 days. And let's hope that I'm wrong for the first time in 29 years. I came back, he says, not only was I right, you're stage 4. I said, so what do we do? He says, well, you're about to have to go through chemo and radiation 5 times a week, 6 to 8 hours a day for the next 4 months of your life. And I said, what you're about to do is you're gonna fight like you never had to fight before. And I said, well, what do I need to do? He says, if you're gonna beat this by going through chemo and radiation, at the amount that I'm gonna give you, there's one thing you're gonna have to do if you're gonna be successful. And my life changed, and I said, well, Doc, what is that? He said, you gotta show up. So my best advice is, as a leader, we don't walk in a room with the answer. But sometimes we walk into a beehive, knowing that it's going to be nothing but attack after attack after attack. But the one thing you have to do as a leader is show up. Because at some point, if you have true faith, if you're there, God will take it. He always does, but some cowards find a reason not to walk into the beehive. So I leave you with that advice, is to show up. But as you go through your career and you develop as a leader, I say this always, you also have to understand the difference between having 30 years experience and the same experience 30 times.
I agree.
Real quick, self-care, taking care of yourself is important. If you flew in, one of the things that you notice, each time on the airplane, they tell you take care of yourself first before you try to save someone else. There's no doubt in my mind, if I was still working 3 years ago, I wouldn't be here. And I say self-care is important because I work out 3 or 4 times a day, and it turned out later on that it saved my life. I went in for an appointment. Doctor said very simply, hey, we're about to take you to the hospital. You're about to have emergency open heart surgery, quadruple bypass. I didn't have a heart attack. I didn't have any symptoms. I said, I'm not doing it. I want to go home and talk about it with my wife. He said, if you get up, you might make it to the parking lot. If you're lucky, you'll make it home, but you're definitely going to die today. I only bring that up because I went from just I want to see what's going on to boom, I'm on a table, I'm getting split down the middle, and I have a 10% chance of making it. I had 100% blockage on one side, 85% on the other side. The only thing that saved my life was the fact that I was in such good shape. And I say that because too many times we neglect ourselves to take care of others. Had I been working, I wouldn't have made it to the doctor's appointment because I had something to do. Had I been working, I would have put off going to the doctor, and someone else would have been finishing up whatever it was I was doing. So I say this to you, and I share it as much as I can. Take care of yourself. Make sure you're spending time exercising, watching what you eat. I can't tell you what to eat because I smoke cigars. Now, I know some of you saying, he smokes cigars, but my doctor said my lungs look great. It's my heart. I'm going to smoke after this.
Well, gentlemen, as we wrap up, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your participation. Audience, I want to just share a quick story. You have an awesome responsibility. You will transform lives. I come from a lineage where my grandmother never learned to read and write. I can remember the day I found that out, but even though she never learned to read and write, because of the institution of public education, my mother and father became first-generation college graduates, and I eventually earned a PhD. There will be people who come through your doors who have the same kinds of experiences. You have the responsibility of changing the trajectory of their lives, regardless of who's in the governor's house or who's in the White House. I ask you to embrace that responsibility. And you can get a copy of my book. Praise God, the Blooming Garden. Thank you, folks.